This episode of the My Latin Life podcast is brought to you by Language Blend, the new best way to learn Spanish. Language Blend focuses on what you actually need to live and get by abroad with daily one-on-one lessons, a dedicated texting partner. It's like living in a Spanish-speaking country without ever leaving home. Go to languageblend.com for more information. Welcome back to the My Latin Life podcast. Since 2014, My Latin Life has been your trusted guide to traveling and living in Latin America. My guest today is Tommy Sikes of Traveltirement.com. Tommy is a CFP, a certified financial planner, and he speaks of the benefits for retiring abroad for American retirees. Tommy, welcome. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Where are you calling in from today?
I am calling in from the world headquarters in North Carolina, USA.
World headquarters,
The
North
world
Carolina.
headquarters being my home office above the garage.
Nice little tax right off there.
A little, very little.
So North Carolina, you're a CFP, certified financial planner. Tell me a bit about your background. You've been working, professionally as a financial planner for a long time.
Yeah, I got into the industry in the early 2000s. Came out of corporate world. Worked at a large computer corporation whose nickname is Big Blue, and so I went from polar opposites, massive corporation, to basically being in the financial service industry by myself. Opened up an office for a fairly well-known national company. Stayed there for about 3 years, and then I kind of knew long term I wanted to be my own boss. My dad was his own boss, and saw a lot of benefits of that. And you just have so much more control over your income and your schedule. So stayed at that company, ran my own office, but for a larger financial services company for about 3 years. Then pulled the plug and started my own what's called registered investment advisor firm. And I'm just a solopreneur, one person operation, but so I've been doing it for, I guess, coming up on 20 years this year, actually.
Cool. So 20 years, registered investment advisor. You have a very good microphone, by the way. Are you recording stuff?
I am doing some YouTube videos now, a part of the Traveltirement brand, which we can get into more. I am basically, it's like a weekly newsletter, but I've started incorporating a YouTube video into that. And I've been recording actually for a while, various YouTube videos. I actually did a local radio station show here in Carborough, North Carolina, for, I don't know, a couple of years. It was just like a very general financial topics little radio show. So I have a little bit of experience with the audio format, but not like you. I don't have any podcast, or certainly not the reps that you have.
Well, no, I appreciate that you have a good mic, and I just subscribed to the YouTube. I can see you kind of just got started, but dude, people love this stuff. People love hearing about $1 homes in Italy, and just sort of like fantasizing about this. It's like retirement porn. Excuse my language, but people kind of just love thinking about this stuff, even if they don't pull the trigger.
Yep, and I'll tell you that, since the pandemic, I think the pandemic's been a lot, put a lot of focus on this. People realizing that remote work maybe it was possible where they didn't think it was before. Also, just the idea of, I don't know, you hope no pandemics is going to happen again, or wars or big political upheaval, but the idea of, hey, if something seriously bad happened in my area, what would be my plan B? Like, where would my escape plan be? And so I think a lot of people over the last few years have really started thinking about that, if not actually like researching and making some plans.
Hmm.
And the cool thing about that, as you know, if nothing else, you can maybe get a nice kind of uh, once in a lifetime vacation out of going to check out a place, and that's where a lot of magic happens, a lot of a lot of growth and a lot of personal uh, you know experience comes from that you never forget.
Yeah, definitely. And so, just for the listeners out there, I kind of first came across Traveltirement, Tommy Sikes on Twitter, where he's been kind of just posting, basically, among other things, he's been posting um, listings of properties in Italy and France where it's like own your own chateau for $200,000, 8 bedrooms, has a river out back, a bunch of wine trees, vineyard, and I love that type of stuff, and it's pretty similar to what we do too, just in terms of showing people that grass might be greener on the other side. So I liked it, and you guys can of course follow Traveltirement on Twitter. The handle is at wander_wealth. Um, so yeah, that's how I first found out about Tommy.
Yep. Thank you for that. Yeah. So at wonder_wealth, that my actual like financial firm name is actually Wander Wealth Incorporated, Wander
Oh,
Wealth Inc.
there you
So
go.
that's where I got that. And the Traveltirement thing was kind of outshoot from that. I knew I wanted to work with people who were either like really interested in travel, and now it's developed into like more niche into, again, people that want to do expat retirement or like serious long-term travel, not just, hey, we want to do a week or two every year, but what if we actually bought a place in
Hmm.
maybe France or Italy that's kind of cheap? Maybe we could buy it for cash, and then we can, spend a month or two there, maybe twice a year. And while we're not there, we can rent it out. Or while we're there, we can rent our house out in the United States, on
Hmm.
Airbnb. And
Yep.
that, that rabbit hole, um, it's just fascinating to me, just the possibilities.
No, absolutely. And so you have a bit of a tagline that I see that you use both on Twitter and on YouTube, which is travel for weeks, months, or years without bankrupting your future. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, and that some people, this Traveltirement thing, again, brand new for me, kind of a new brand, a new idea, but ultimately, and this obviously from tons of guests you've had before, the benefits of considering this expat retirement, going to countries with very low cost of living, living in places where you maybe don't have to own a car, um, is for financial plans. These things can actually, as opposed to being like deal breakers, like, oh, we're going to have to win the lottery to be able to do this thing. These things can actually be like saviors for retirement for a lot of people. Just the again, when some of those properties you were saying, on Twitter, I'll share properties and be like, hey, here's this place. It's 4 bedroom, 3 bath. It's in France, south of France, amongst the rolling hills and in this little village. A ton of people will respond and be like, there's no way it's that cheap. Like there's something wrong with it. It's going to fall down. You're like, you don't have the whole story. And it's like, no, there are actually places like this in the world where, number one, just the general cost of living is lower in a lot of these countries, but also particularly in France and Italy, as you know, there's over the years been a huge migration of people from typically the south of those countries and the rural parts into cities
Hmm.
or northern parts. Like the bulk of the population of France is basically around Paris. But as soon as you get out to southern France, southwestern France, there's just literally these like storybook villages with castles and rivers and that, the stuff you mentioned,
Hmm.
where you can buy properties for 50,000 US dollars, 100,000 US dollars, 150, and these are like full houses. Sometimes you can buy them fully furnished. in these idyllic locations. And I don't know when the last time you were in the United States, but in my area, I mean, like the average house price in like, and we're in a like a McMansion kind of neighborhood, starter, not starter home, but that kind of middle tier, you know, I don't know, 2,000 square foot house. There's not a house anywhere around here you could buy for less than probably $450,000.
I thought you were gonna
And
say a
and
lot
I'm
more than
talking
that.
about not even new construction, like
I thought you were gonna say
10,
700K
15
at
years.
least.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy. And again, we're in a relatively low cost part of the United States.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I put on Twitter recently, just because I was looking at like the Zillow value of our house. I was like, we could sell our house, pay off our mortgage, buy a house for like $80,000 in Italy, $120,000 in France, for cash, and you could, of course, back out like maybe 10,000 each for like renovations and things, and then I could still have like over 13 years of rent per month at like $1,500 for rent, and I'm 52, so that's like, hey, that would take me to almost 65, and I could own two properties overseas for cash. Yeah, it just, I mean, things like that. I'm like, that blows my mind. The relative expense of property and just cost of living in some places. It's crazy.
Yeah, 100%. And I think one of the big macro themes around this is that most people in the United States statistically just have not saved enough for retirement, and they have very little savings, especially um, outside of their home equity, and they just do not have enough money to retire comfortably in the US. And
Yep.
so for a lot of people, it's not just, oh, France would be nice, blah, 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 but it really might be a necessity that they're going to have to either downgrade significantly in the States or make some sort of sacrifice or consider, Latin America or perhaps the Mediterranean just to live comfortably. Because, I mean, I don't know, you've probably done the math. Like, how much per month does it cost for a retired two-person couple in the United States in their 60s or something? It's got to be, I don't know, like 4,000 a month more, right?
I would think, yeah, 4 to 5 thousand
Yeah,
if you're talking again,
easily, right?
not
Like health,
not poverty level, yeah, not
yeah, and
poverty level
even
like
the
living.
healthcare alone is probably like $1,000 a month or more, right? Like just the
Yep.
the just the plan. And so, if you're relying solely on a government pension and Social Security, that's not going to cover that. What's Social Security even give a couple these days?
I think I saw recently the average for Social Security for 2023 is something like 15 or 1600 a month,
It's a big
and then
gap.
yeah, and that's for like one person. Then a spouse will either have whatever their Social Security is, so it could be another 1,500, or if their Social Security is less than half of the spouse, then they get half of what the spouse gets. So the way I like to think about it, like round numbers, if I'm if my Social Security is 2,000 a month, and say my wife didn't work or she worked a much lower paying job, her Social Security might be $1,000 a month. So that's 3,000, which, and I'm talking about, that's not a low Social Security. That's, a pretty decent Social Security. But $3,000, you know, again, you rent in you know, a small, like one bedroom apartment, even in our area is, at least probably 1,750, 2,000 a month
Jesus.
at a decent, in a decent place, maybe like downtown somewhere where you could walk around.
And not need a
It's
car,
really
because
it's
that's another
really
1,000.
crazy. Yep, it's nuts.
So
And then
basically, unless you're getting help
if
from
you
your
want to
kids,
retire early,
yeah.
like you said, the healthcare cost, it just is nuts.
So healthcare's 1,000, cars 1,000, rent is at least 1,500, and that's just to be somewhere random that sucks. And so it's just not adding up for a lot of people.
Yep.
So they're going to need help from their kids, or, you know, hopefully they have like a paid off house or something. But yeah, bottom line is it's not adding up for a lot of people, right? I mean, you should be telling me, not me to you, but it's not adding up for a lot of people. And so I think, and maybe you could get into this because you are a CFP, you're an expert, and you could tell us that I believe that U.S. Social Security pensions, they're typically not taxed overseas. Like if you move to Mexico, Latin America, hopefully in Europe it's the same. Like that country doesn't tax the Social Security, so you're only going to have to deal with the U.S. taxes, and then yeah, and then you're basically like scot free, and you can kind of live off that pension in a lower cost locale.
Yeah, and I again still researching the details on this, but you're correct in that most of the countries where the United States has a tax treaty, which most of the countries you'd probably be talking about, um, you if you're still a U.S. citizen, even if you have residency in another country, you still have to file in the United States. But any
Hmm.
tax you pay to the foreign country, you get a tax credit for. So that basically reduces your tax that would be due otherwise. So um, it's not that you don't have to file. It's just the United States says, "Hey, we're not going to double tax you, up to a certain amount. There's limits on it, I think, but you can, if you're making money in Italy, let's say, and I know there's certain parts of Italy in the south where they now have like a special. They're trying to get foreign investments and foreigners to
Hmm.
move there. There's like a flat 7% income tax um, that you can get. Now, pensions and Social Security may not be included in that part, but whatever that income tax is, you would then, when you filed in the United States, you would get a credit back for that tax you paid. So just so again, you're not getting double dinged.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
all there's details for each country, but it's I mean the most important thing is just the cost of living. There are tons of places, as you know, Mexico, Panama, Ecuador, again, southern Italy, southwestern France. Some of these kind of rural areas where a couple with an average Social Security could actually live pretty well. Um,
They live like kings. They could have a
certainly,
maid. They could
certainly
have a
considered.
chef. They could
Yep,
all that stuff.
especially compared to United States, it's just not going to
Hmm.
happen.
You could have in-home care if you needed like on-site staff to, because you have health issues. You could have literally someone living with you full time, or who's, or even if they don't live with you, like kind of full time dedicated to you on call for way less money. Like how much would it cost to have like a full time nurse in the U.S.? That would be probably like
It's insane.
that'd
It's
be
it's
probably
insane. I
close to
actually
ten
just
grand a month or something, right?
yeah,
Like.
I have unfortunately I have clients right now who are going through the process with parents who um, one of the parents needs skilled nursing, so they basically the choices were going to like a skilled nursing facility. But you're right, it was like between I would say $6,000 and $10,000 a month. And again, these people, it's not like they're multimillionaires. Um, and then the spouse who was like the primary caregiver, they can't do that. All that they can't carry the husband around. It made just physically impossible. So then they were talking about getting in home care, and it's same thing. It's $4,000 to $7,000 a month, and because and then sadly people start thinking, well, okay, maybe we don't have to. Um, I don't know. We can cancel our our fun stuff, the TV and the um, subscriptions to various things, and before long, not only is it still expensive, but then your quality of life just starts to go downhill, and that's nobody wants that. Certainly not the people, but not their kids, their family. It's a rough spot for a lot of people trying to retire in the United States now.
Hmm. So, what are some of the common situations that you're seeing in the states? I guess in terms of like moving abroad, are people kind of looking for a winter home and to be snowbirds, or are they looking for really like a 12-month a year full time home?
Um, well, like I said, this is fairly new for me from a professional standpoint. Um, my feeling is there's a combination of people that basically thinking about the things we just discussed. They're either going to have to work for maybe 5 to 10 extra years to be able to live in the United States because basically they can't retire. They would have to continue to do something for income,
Mm,
or they can look at Central America, South America, Italy, and then you get into issues with, well, what if they still have family here, and how do you budget for like what I would call like reverse vacations? So you live somewhere else and then you
yeah,
vacation in the United States,
visiting the
maybe
kids
two
in
or
the
three times
States.
a year to
It's funny. I haven't heard
you see
that.
the kids, you catch up, um, take care of any legal issues that you need to, stuff like that. But it's a good, it's a good kind of variety of people. Like I said, me personally, what kind of what I like to think about is either longer term travel or actual like residency, just because I like the idea of living like a local, the immersion of it. If you are trying to learn a language, it's hugely advantageous to spend a ton of time there and be kind of forced to use the language.
Hmm.
If you're doing that, you're less likely to be, you're not going to be going to see sites every day that might be expensive. You're probably going to be cooking in a lot more, shopping at local markets. I mean, everything can get less expensive kind of on a daily basis with long-term travel. You're not, trying to fly different places to squeeze stuff in. It seems like a lot more. I like the more relaxed style of travel.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about this because you do put a fair bit of emphasis on the travel component, but if your audience is really kind of people in their 50s and early 60s and they're really trying to retire, is travel really kind of the top thing on their mind? I probably doubt it. They're probably looking just at somewhere to retire, live comfortable, maybe have a maid, maybe have that nursing or just where is their decent health care and that kind of stuff. And if they can visit museums and you know Roman 2,000-year-old stone monuments, like that's a bonus, I guess. But I imagine it's just more about kind of making ends meet and good weather and that kind of stuff. But you tell me kind of what you've been seeing.
Yeah, I think that's correct. That it becomes less about um, again the kind of chaotic travel of, oh, on Monday we're going to go see this place, and then we have a reservation at this place that night. Tuesday we're going to go to this other thing. Then we're going to come back, but then we got to get up early next morning because we're going on this little canoeing trip. I mean, and that kind of travel I've done, and it's wonderful. And you can, that's like the exciting kind of travel. But you get to a certain age and or just to a certain point in your life where the simpler things, again, the immersion, to me, like when we travel, my wife and I, like when we go to Europe, when we get to a new village or a new town or whatever, one of the first things we'll do is either do a like a bike ride or a run or
Mm,
walk
that's nice.
for maybe 3 or 6 miles just around, like no plan, like we're going to drop our bags off, we're going to go out, we're just going to start walking. And that kind of stuff to me is amazing because that's where like little magic things happen. You just come around a corner and discover a little, I don't know, street performance going on
Yep.
that is amazing, that you're like, oh my gosh, you really feel like you're there in the moment. Or I remember we were in Paris and we just went kind of on a walk one day, one of the first mornings we were there, and we ended up coming home at like 7 that night. I mean, I literally was like, oh, we can just walk down like the couple blocks here and see what's what. and we ended up doing like 40 or 50,000 steps. It was insane. But in that one day, you just see so much stuff, behind the scenes stuff, little things you wouldn't see if you're, zooming by in a taxi or, um, you know, taking the train from, just high speed train from one place to another. Those little kind of serendipitous moments to happen is, I don't know, that's what I love about travel. I mean, I do love seeing, the famous sites and things, but um, like I said, those little things are like unique. Those are the things where you're gonna be like, all right, nobody I know who's been to Paris has seen these things that we saw on this walk. Maybe they saw the Eiffel Tower. Yeah, everybody's seen the Eiffel Tower when you go to Paris, but um, those things are what make it extra special to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, even in your bio, it says focus on Italy and France. How did you kind of narrow it down to Italy and France? And I guess where have you been now that you've been enjoying your own style of travel retirement?
Italy and France is just 100% personal preference. I mean, number one, they're both two of maybe the best countries in the world as far as history and art and food and geography and sites and all that. So, there's never a shortage of um, of stuff. But we have my wife and I have traveled to both those countries and want to go back just because, again, you can't quote unquote see France in one trip. I mean, you could spend 10 years there and never see everything.
It's true.
So um, that was part of it. Another part was for the what I call more like affordable travel, or um, again, not high end necessarily expat retirement. There's not as much content, I guess, out there for those two. I mean, Italy now there's more, because of the €1 homes and things like that. But I still think for Americans moving to France and Italy, I mean, on YouTube, you can find a lot of channels, which is like, again, people living in a nice apartment in Paris, or, um, they again renovated a chateau with vineyards, and it's not super, it's not super affordable. I mean, it's way more affordable than the United States, but um, so that was another thing was I wanted to hopefully attract and also in the future be able to work with people who are just kind of normal people like we've talked about, people that maybe haven't saved as much as they
Should have.
think they should have, or whatever, life has happened and they feel behind and they're looking for options. They don't want to work the rest of their life. Maybe they just have a dream where they're like, I'd love to live in Italy
Tuscany.
for a month or two.
Everyone wants to have retired to Tuscany or something, right? Eat bread,
Yeah,
love
and
stuff.
exactly, like, yeah, and that's what people, when you think retirement in Italy, people are like, oh yeah, I see those pictures of the rolling grass hills and the whatever they're called, the tall thin trees, that line the driveway.
Yeah.
Um, which again, that's a great. I mean, Tuscany is great.
Dude, that's
Florence,
what I'm trying to do,
incredible.
bro. I'm trying to have the God, I can't even explain it. The long driveway with the trees on either sides, and then there's like a loop
Yep,
in
yep.
front of the
I mean, when you start
chateau.
describing it, everybody's got that. You have that
Yeah,
vision in your mind. You're like,
exactly.
oh yeah, I know the place,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
amazing. But as having traveled to Italy, there's a tons of just quaint, beautiful, historic cities all over. I mean, people forget that Italy was like, I don't know, 12 or 15 or 20 different actual like little countries until,
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe like the 1800s. I mean,
Yeah,
Italy as
it
a country has
unified
not
in
been
1876, something 1870 something.
something like that, and people
Yeah.
forget that you can literally, I mean, we all know it's like a long country, from north to south, but every little region, the architecture is going to be a little different. The type of wine they make is different. Maybe the kind of foods they eat is different. It's like 20 different little countries in and of itself. And Tuscany, because of Under the Tuscan Sun and a lot of, movies and things that were set there. And of course, Rome and Lazio, there's so much other stuff that is just magical. That's just so cool. around the country. And like I said, my wife and I, we when we came to visit, we went to Florence. We did the Florence thing, which is everybody should do that just because it's incredibly historic and compact. So much stuff in that small amount of space. But again, that's like a tiny, tiny, tiny part of what the whole country is about. We can't wait to go back.
Hey guys, quick break from the episode to tell you about Bitrefill. Bitrefill allows you to shop online and in person without banks, converting your crypto directly into merchant balance. We're talking gift cards to Nike, Amazon, Apple, Airbnb, Hotels.com, and many more, all paid for with crypto. Bitrefill offers more than 10,000 gift card options in 180 countries, including the USA, Canada, all across Latin America, including Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, El Salvador, and many more. You can also apply the code MyLatinLife at checkout to get 10% back on your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information. Yeah, very cool. And I mentioned offline, I don't think we've mentioned it since we've been recording, but at the time of this recording, I am in Italy right now. So I'm in Sicily and spending about a month in Sicily in total. I've been to I've never actually admitted this because I am just a semi-anonymous figure, but I've gone to Italy every year the past 3 years for like a month each. Partly due to well, I shouldn't even say too much, but yeah, I've been the past 3 years and kind of checked out different regions. But it's my first time in Sicily, and I'm enjoying it. And since you're responsible, and it's only 2 p.m., 3 p.m. for you, and it's 8 something p.m. for me, I'm actually drinking some Sicilian wine. Four
Of course,
fifty euros, four
for
or five
medicinal
euros
purposes.
for the bottle. You can't not.
Yeah, I have a friend who is he has a business. Basically, it's kind of an online business, but investment related. And anyway, he travels kind of full time. I mean, they have a place in the United States, but um, he works remote a ton. I mean, they're all over the place. And I think one of my Twitter posts was like, "Oh yeah, Italy has got the history, the food, the pasta, the geography, so much stuff, beaches, mountains, snow, blah blah blah." And he comes back, he goes, "Dude, you forgot the best and cheapest wine on the planet." And I was
Mm.
like, "Yep, Paul, you're absolutely correct to call me
It,
out."
it really does have everything going for it. Italy and the Mediterranean for kind of older couples and people who are deriving their income elsewhere. Kind of that classic geo arbitrage scenario. And it also, Italy reminds me a lot of Mexico in a lot of ways, just to kind of pull things back slightly to Latin America, or to make a comparison, just
Hmm.
because the fruit is extremely good, the food is very fresh. There's kind of like music and street performers and guys selling roses and stuff that kind of happens a lot in Mexico. There's people hanging out in the plazas, the piazzas, until like midnight every night of the week. Families just sitting there eating ice cream, kicking the soccer ball until midnight on a weeknight. Things that you just don't see in the US. In the US, it's basically a ghost town after, after dark, after 7 p.m. Whereas in Italy and Latin America, it's, there's still just a lot of life. Um, and so I do see a lot of comparisons to the two regions in a lot of ways. It's cool.
Yep, that's awesome.
Yeah. Have you ever looked at Portugal?
I have briefly, and some of the those posts I do where I show like cheap properties in France and Italy. Um, there, I've gotten a bunch of direct messages on Twitter from people. They're like, "Hey, can you like help me find a similar place like in Portugal?" I mean, that I get that quite a bit. And right now, just to not spread myself thin, I haven't like dug deep into it. But once I mean, kind of the long term vision of Traveltirement is, um, you know, kind of building the audience now, trying to figure out like what kind of stuff people are really interested in, the people that I could see myself working with longer term, and then expanding it into multiple countries, do some basic like, kind of this similar stuff to what you guys do on LatAm, uh, Latin life, is develop either a course about, well, here's some basic things you need to do to prepare, to either move to this country or maybe, whatever it is, buy property. But then for those people who are like about to pull the trigger, is do some actual financial plans. Like let's take like 6 to 8 weeks. We're going to get all your financial information together. We're going to figure out, where you want to go, how much we think it's going to cost, what costs can you offset by either renting your place out in the United States while you're over there, or vice versa, renting that place while you're here. Put all this stuff together, and kind of at the end of that 6 or 8 weeks, have basically scheduled like a test retirement for people, so that they would actually travel to the country, maybe go to the region where they think they would want to be, spend like 2 weeks minimum as a living as a local, and just to test it out. And so Italy and France, obviously, I'm kind of getting there on those two, but Portugal is definitely the other most popular one that I get asked about. So that would be the next one to add into that kind of program, where I will have done enough research to be able to say, hey, okay, cost of living you can expect is this. Here's how you're going to take care of healthcare stuff while you're over there. Here's like transportation options while you're there. Because like one thing I found out recently, and I don't know if you knew this, but as an American, you can buy property in France or Italy. Like there's no special, thing you have to do. You don't have to be a citizen. You don't have to have residency.
Mhm.
But in Italy, at least, you cannot buy a car as an American. And so then I was like, oh man, what if you bought one of these places out, cheap place out in this village, and you wanted to make it like a lock up and leave, where it has a garage. Maybe you want to put a car there. When you come there, you connect the battery again, and you can go out on adventures. But I was like, oh man, you literally cannot own a car in Italy as a foreigner. You have to be a resident. Um, there's all kinds of little things like that you discover that you know you then have to figure out, okay, well, how would we get around this? Like, what would be the options? It's fascinating to learn.
Yeah. And I think people don't realize, sounds bad, but how little money people actually make in France and Italy compared to an American salary. Because in France, people really only take home like $1,500 a month, something like that. And so the cost of living is a lot lower than you might expect. You might think France is kind of like on par with the States, in terms of, HDI and GDP and all that, but it's really like the salaries are so much lower, and so you can really get by on the pension and this and that, and be totally good. And an espresso is going to be less than $1, etc. It's kind of bewildering actually when you start asking people how low their salaries are.
Yep. And the benefits, at least in a lot of areas of those countries too, is number one, either the way the cities or towns are structured is you can do a lot of things, you know, on foot, where maybe you don't have to have the expense of a car and gas or
Exactly.
insurance on a car, or because of the way their societies are set up, the public transportation is so much better. Maybe there's buses everywhere and they're free, or the trains or subways that are pretty low cost, which people in the United States, you can't. I mean, it's literally like a requirement in most places to own a car. It's and then you have to pay the gas, and you have to have you know oil changes and have insurance, and the time spent. It's yeah, there's just so many things that make it more affordable.
I truly believe that like not owning a car is one of the biggest things that allows people to reach financial independence earlier, um, and just save so much more, because it's really 1,000 minimum per month, often maybe more like 1,500. And and this counts for all the young listeners too. Like that extra 1,000, 1,500 bucks a month, that might add up to 20 grand a year. Um, Not owning a car, you average that over 5 years, that's 100 grand or more when you incorporate like the time value of money. And so if
Yep.
you can get away with not owning a car, you're going to be in a much better place to have cash that you can put towards an emergency fund or to invest in a business or any number of things, right? So not owning a car is huge, and Europe is very much designed to not own a car. And in Italy, you don't even want to own a car. Italian drivers are insane, um, right? It'd be cool to have a little Vespa or something, though. I don't know if the retirees are into that, cruising around on the
Yep.
Vespa at 60 years old. But having a little Vespa would be cool
Yeah.
if you're there like full time. Pick one up for like 2 grand, whatever.
Yeah. Or, I actually, somebody did suggest, particularly in these like kind of mountainy villages, hilly villages, are like, you can have an e-bike, like just have e-bike
Mm.
or two while you're there with a, little cargo front. And that basically is like your car. I mean, you can go to the store, fill it with groceries. I don't know what the range on those things are, but go from one village to the next village, and not have to worry about drinking and driving necessarily. Now, of course, you got to worry about the other drivers, people on the roads, but um, yeah, there are potential options.
Yeah, people are much more respectful of pedestrians in general in Europe, where when you pull up to a crosswalk as a pedestrian, the cars actually stop for you, which is a nice bonus as well.
Yep. Well, in Italy and France too, being two kind of bicycle centric countries, with the Giro d'Italia and the Tour de France, it's not like biking is some sport that nobody ever knows about in those two countries. So at least you have that recognition.
Hmm. Random question for you: Are you familiar with Amelia and JP? They're
I am.
yeah.
I am. I love Amelia and JP. I don't like know them, but JP and I have conversed back and forth on Twitter a few times, and I love what they're doing with their YouTube channel and their I guess they have like services or whatever to help people moving to Ecuador, don't they?
Yep, they have a course about Ecuador relocation, and they talk about primarily about Mexico and Ecuador for retirees, because they're kind of right in the same demographic. You and JP actually look kind of similar because you both have, I think, like the like white beard goatee thing going on.
Yes, I'm very well seasoned.
But yeah, and they're previous podcast guests as well. If anyone, any of the listeners haven't heard that, check out the Amelia and JP episode as well. An American couple that moved to Ecuador, tried out Mexico as well, but moved to Ecuador, and they're just absolutely thrilled to be living abroad and enjoying the low cost of living and a new life of adventure. And I definitely see a lot of parallels. I feel like you guys would do a good collaboration.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love that they share so much, stuff, and they share very detailed cost of living reports, and here's how much it was when we lived here, and here's how much it was when we moved over to this other place, and it's terrific information.
Yeah. And so, what about you in terms of services, Tommy? So, do people come to you and I imagine you kind of like take a look at their holistic situation, you look at their 401k, this and that, and kind of create plans for people, or walk me through what you do in the 20-year business you've been running.
Yeah, that part, which kind of my like quote unquote day job, is as a more traditional financial planning. So financial planning, investment management, mostly older retired clients. Um, some in their 60s, 70s, even all the way to their 80s. And with the travel retirement, I'd really like to engage a slightly younger audience, not super young, but I don't know, people like myself. I'm 52. We have one kid left to go to college before we're empty nesters, and the idea of kind of again making plans for every year. Let's spend a month in this country or that country, and putting a plan together, an actual financial plan where you incorporate Social Security for you and your spouse. You talk about here's how much we think healthcare is going to cost in retirement. Here's all of our investing accounts and our pensions. This the wife was a teacher, so she's going to have this teacher pension. We're going to incorporate that income and put it all together into a plan where you can have a reasonable expectation of everything working out. Life always happens, but having a at least a compass that says yes, we're pointed in the right direction can help people just have confidence that they can do this. Because I think a lot of people dream about travel, or I'd love to go spend a year in France or in Florence or whatever, but kind of building an actual plan, having somebody that's going to try to poke holes in it, but then also somebody's going to say, you know what, you can do this and you need to do it. Like let's let's get some reservations made. Let's at least go do a test run for a
Mm.
couple weeks, and you can find out right now, is this a spot, or should we recalculate and maybe look at somewhere else. Um, so yeah, putting those plans together. Like I said, I don't have like a program related to that yet, but that will be coming. And that I get a lot of feedback from people online who are, they ask questions. Well, if I bought this place in Italy, like, well, what are the property taxes, and what's the income tax situation like? Do I have to file taxes there? Do I have to do something special in the United States? I'm building that library of knowledge, and then hopefully we'll be able to share it. Um, you know, for people that are like on the cusp, that would be like more of like a paid product. Hey, let's do this 6 to 8 week thing. Um,
Yeah, yeah. A lot of
you know,
repetitive questions that you can kind of handle all at once.
yep, exactly.
What are you, when people come to you and with your clients, I guess in the traditional business and I suppose with Traveltirement as well, what is the most, like, where do people need to take corrective action? Where do you feel like people's financial situation is the most screwed up, I guess? And, yeah, I guess like what's what are some of the most important behaviors or implementations that you try to do?
Um, I'll answer it a couple of ways. For people who are younger, and by younger I mean, I don't know, 40 or under, the the absolute number one thing they can do is save and invest more. Like the actual rate that they're saving is it's gotten better over the last few years with the pandemic, like the emergency money that was sent out, but now it's creeping back up. Like you see credit card um, balances starting to rise again. But setting up like a monthly automatic deduction from your paycheck goes into an investment account, automatically gets invested, um, kind of out of sight, out of mind. Like don't make it manual, so you have to do it every month. Setting something up like that when you're younger, particularly if you can save 20% or more of your gross income, is massive, because it does two things. It not only the pot gets bigger, and as it compounds it gets bigger faster, but that you also learn to live off of you know 80% or less of your income. If it can be 70%, that's even better, because then everybody normalizes to whatever their
Lifestyle
you know
creep.
you, yep, you normalize to your house. You think, oh, that big house is going to be awesome. You move into the big house, and then it's no longer the big house. It's just the
Yeah.
house. It's just your house. And the same thing with cars. Same thing with clothes. Um, if you can train yourself and learn to live on less, that that is just beneficial in all other facets. It's exponential. The second way I'll answer this is for the older people, so maybe over 40, or like me, like in your 50s, and you're feeling like behind a little bit on retirement savings or your investments, your 401k, things like that. And I know you preach this a lot, look at ways to make money online. you know, just whether it's consulting, whether it's group coaching, whether it's software, WordPress, again, podcasting, and I don't. When I say podcasting, as you know, like there's a lot of stuff that goes into podcasting. Then that's just one area. If you think about, there's the making of the podcast, then there's the scheduling of the people, then there's the website that has the podcast on it, then there's maybe getting advertisers for the podcast. There's all sorts of outlets where a person could become an expert on like a very specific thing, and that could be done remotely, and where you're not on your feet all day. That's a big thing for older folks. The idea of, again, being the Walmart greeter or the on your feet working in a restaurant job or whatever. I know a ton of people do that and they have to do that. And some people probably love it, but I just imagine that wear and tear for maybe way less than you feel like you should be getting. There's so many options out there for income sources, non-traditional income sources, you know, like where you own your income, you control it. You don't necessarily work as an employee. You're a freelancer or a solopreneur or whatever. That that can be the key for helping the people who are behind catch up. They're not necessarily going to catch up on the size of the investments, but they can catch up as far as the cash flow, the gaps of cash flow that they need.
Yeah, makes sense. I saw a number just today, yesterday. I was crafting some tweets, and I saw that on average, people should have $1.25 million US for retirement. Um, what do you think would be an adequate number for the average couple um, retiring at 63 to 65?
Um, it, honestly, it's all over the board, and this I see threads on Twitter too, where somebody would be like, oh, for me, like my number is, you know, 1.5575 million, something very specific. And then other people are coming in like, are you crazy? Like I can't retire on less than $5 million. I mean, it's all over the board, but are you familiar with Money with Katie?
No, no, I'm not.
She has a podcast slash show, and she did are you familiar with the 4% rule?
Yeah, yeah, I'm familiar with that from
Yeah.
Fire.
So
I know.
4% rule, kind of rule of thumb. You can take 4% off of some, sum of money that's invested, increase it every year from that initial 4% for inflation, and it should last for like 30 plus years. She did a thing recently where
Money
it
or
turns out,
Katie did the Money with
yes,
Katie,
Katie did.
and sorry to
Yes.
interrupt your flow, but I'm just I'm just looking at this on the podcast app. So Morning Brew, I guess,
Yes. Morning Brew, I think, like sponsors her,
is the
her,
sponsor. So it
yep.
says the tagline or whatever the description is: "Finance bros are out. Hashtag rich girls are in. Join Money with Katie and her guests as they talk. Blah blah blah."
Yes. She's hilarious. I
This
mean,
is what
she's
you
a
listen
great, oh yeah, she's hilarious.
to.
Um,
Okay.
but she did this, basically deep dive into why the 4% rule should actually probably be more like 5% or 5.5%,
Okay.
because a lot of people, like a lot of people have fixed cost that don't inflate, like your mortgage, or maybe I don't know, there might be certain car payments and things like that. Anyway, long story short, the amount you can take out, if you're able to live in a um, adaptable way, you can have a smaller pool of money than just the traditional kind of 4% rule. And the reason I say that is the answer to your question about how much money it is totally depends on what the cost of living is going to be wherever you
No,
retire.
of course, of
So,
course.
if it's Mexico or Central America or South America,
No, I
we're
get it. I
literally
mean, I guess
talking.
North Carolina is like a pretty average place. It's cheaper than Boston. You
Oh
know,
yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah, and here I would say, 4 to 6 thousand a month is probably a good good target. And again, that's
And
not
that's
like a,
like
you know,
when you
high class
already owe your
lifestyle.
own. Sorry to interrupt. Is that when you already own your own home? Because I guess that's like probably the biggest variable.
Yeah. And the mortgage, you know, payoff, if you obviously, you know, some people have refinanced in the last few years so that they might still have, you know, 20 or 30 years to go, but they have a very low rate. So they would not want to pay that off early, necessarily.
Gotcha.
But but yeah, the, you know,
So
46,000.
4 to 6K when you already own your own home.
Um, yeah, and it depends on where specifically you are. But I'm in rural North Carolina. You know, we're like in a tiny town. We're not in Charlotte. We're not in Raleigh or Cary. You know, some of the places that are very
That's wild.
expensive.
You'd have to assume it's basically double that in like Boston or like
Yep,
you know what I mean,
yep,
like somewhere like a financial center or something.
yep. And then you compare that to, again, South America or Southern Italy, where for $2,000 $2,500 a month, you're absolutely, you have no problems whatsoever. I mean, you have a nice place. You can eat out regularly. You can pay all your utilities. Um, you know, there's it just, the world opens up so much more when you can get those costs down. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, keep going about this. Keep going about the 4% rule and stuff.
Yeah. So that the 4% rule, you know, if you just work at the numbers backwards, so say, so for $1 million, 4% is $40,000. So $3,333 a month. So at $1 million, if you're using 4%, that's what it is. If you're using 5.5%, let's say, it suddenly goes to $55,000. And then based on that amount of money that you think you're going to spend, you can kind of work backwards into the amount of money you need to have saved. The other thing that the 4% rule doesn't include, though, are things like Social Security. So, you know, at some point, the Social Security is going to kick in, whether you take it early or wait till your actual date you're supposed to take it. You know, that could be $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a month. Then, if, like we were talking about, you add in, say, $500 to $1,000 a month of some, again, not necessarily time based work that you can do, something where you can, you know, either work a project or, um, you know, I know, like, you could do some kind of group coaching call where maybe you do it just once a month or twice a month, and it's $50 a person, and you know, get 10 people. That's $500. You do that twice a month. That's $1,000, and maybe you spend, I don't know, 10 hours total with the prep and the presentation. Again, it doesn't have to be a full time thing, but just that little extra 500 to $1,000 a month can be a massive difference in when and where you could retire.
Mhm.
It all adds up. And again, it's just a numbers game. That's why, like, so, you know, financial planning software nowadays is super advanced, where you can incorporate all these things and assumed inflation values and assumed returns, taxes, and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty amazing the numbers you can come up with fairly quickly without having to get lost in a spreadsheet.
Mhm. I'm sure this 10% inflation definitely screwed up a lot of people's calculations.
Absolutely. And hopefully it's not going to be here for too much longer, but it has, and it's a crazy time. The last time we had inflation like this in the 70s, the, you know, number one, employment situation was way different. It was much higher unemployment, but the stock market had like some of the worst crashes that we've had in a long time. Now, of course we had the pandemic pullback, but then immediately rebounded. It's you know, never say never as far as like what's going on in the markets, but I don't know that we've ever seen a situation exactly like this. High inflation, super low unemployment, but then like earnings reports from companies are still seem to be pretty good. Like, we're maybe not going to have a recession, but we almost kind of need to have a recession to reset the inflation stuff. It's kind of a wacky time.
Mhm. Hey everybody, hey everybody. Quick break from the podcast to tell you about Language Blend, the best new way to learn Spanish. Language Blend was co-founded by Jake Nomada, friend of the podcast, decade of experience in Latin America, and Jake and his team, they put everything into this program that they wish they had in terms of how to level up quickly with your Spanish language skills. Because the faster that you can get conversationally fluent in Spanish, the better the experience that you're going to have in Latin America. So go to languageblend.com for more information. I have a question for you. Just going to kind of push on the Italy, France stuff. So you're in rural North Carolina, which is, I assume, like pretty good climate, probably some of the better climate in all the United States in terms of being temperate all year round. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um,
I mean we have
and
seasons, but
yeah,
it doesn't get it gets hot, but not like southern,
yeah. But
Texas hot.
it's not the Northeast, it's not Texas, it's not Florida. It's pretty like temperate all year round. Probably somewhat
Mhm.
comparable to Tuscany anyway. You know what I mean? And so and the cost of living there is not too bad. And so for people in your situation where you're in a place with like decent weather and a low cost of living in the US, why even the push to look for Italy and France and other retirement destinations? I would get it if it was a guy from, you know, Minnesota that started Traveltirement, but I'm almost curious how it ended up being a North Carolina guy that actually has a pretty good setup.
That that's a good question. I mean, it is, and it's great. I mean, I don't like not like living here. It's great. Um, I honestly just love travel. I mean, I love the anticipation of it. I love kind of the planning of it. Um, and I wanted to, as again, we get older and our kids start to leave. I honestly, this is slightly self serving, but I wanted to develop some kind of thing with my business where I could justify actually traveling, where I'm not
Hmm.
like, hey, I'll be out of the office for the next month. Please don't try to contact me, kind of thing, but rather, hey, exciting. We're going, next month we're going to live in, you know, whatever, the Piedmont of Italy in northern Italy. And I'll be, reporting to you about all the things we're finding and talk about the cost of living there. And, you know, like, I don't know that I love the traveling, but I also love the sharing of the stuff, of of the travel, because it's so, I don't know, just the best. Like just have like the best memories from travel when I was younger with my parents, um, trips with my wife. We did 2 weeks in France where we basically crossed from Bordeaux all the way to Provence, and just again, it's just magical to me. So yeah, I'm not trying to escape necessarily, but I do just love being in another place, another culture. Um, there's nowhere else like again France and Italy where you can have kind of modern transportation, high speed internet. It's not like a third world country, but around every corner there's a 1,000-year old castle or 1,500-year-old
It's
ruins,
true.
and um, it's just a special combination of things.
No, it definitely makes sense. I mean, yeah, you can't go wrong with France and Italy just in terms of like the daily adventures and cool stuff to explore. Absolutely. So that's cool. That's good that you're kind of maintaining your adventurous spirit. Um, so Tommy, tell me about the newsletter. So you're writing a weekly newsletter for Traveltirement. What kind of content are you putting in there?
It is basically right now I am doing sharing a single cheap property, and I actually just did a poll on Twitter, like what do people consider cheap properties, and my choices were 50,000 or below, 100,000 or below, or 200,000 and below. And of course, they were all exactly even. Like, so again,
Hmm.
it's all a relative thing. So I'll just say at this point, all the properties are under 200,000 US dollars. Some are way under that. Um, so anyway, I just like sharing a property that I think is like either in a cool setting, or maybe it's like in a village where you could buy it and either live there or go there. And kind of what we talked about, everything is a easy walk away. There's a cafe down the street. There's a castle, a kilometer away. Maybe a river nearby that you can go canoeing or kayaking on. Um, anyway, so I share one property each week, and then just one uh, cool piece of information that I found out. Maybe about uh, taxes. The some tax thing I found out about that people may not know about, or
Hmm.
some travel hack. Anyway, it's very short. Goes out Saturday mornings, typically at 9 a.m. It's like literally a 2 or 3 minute read. Now I have it so that it links. You can go watch the YouTube video if you want, to dive in deep on the cheap property. But anyway, I love actually doing it, like, because it forces me to not only find the property, but then I'll like go into Google Street Maps and like quote unquote walk around the neighborhood and see what kind of restaurants are in the area. And hey, are there ski resorts near here, or what's the closest beach? And it's like I kind of do it for myself, but then I love sharing it because it's like people find out about a town they never would have found out about, that's unbelievably beautiful in the mountains of Italy, with a beach 30 minutes away and ski resorts 45 minutes away. And they're just like I had no idea. Like, all I know about Italy is Rome or Florence. Anyway, so that's what the newsletter basically is every week.
Very cool. And where are you finding the leads for the properties? Like, are you going to local listing websites? Where are you digging these opportunities up?
The the For Italy, there's multiple basically internet sites you can go to. For Italy, there's one called Gateaway, like GATE dash the word away, gateaway.com. And they have kind of like a curated list of properties in Italy. Typically they'll be more like um I don't want to say like novelty, but it's not just like apartments in a high-rise apartment building. It's going to be like a rustic farmhouse, or a townhouse in a little village. So I like starting there. There's another Italian site called Technocasa, technocasa.it. And that's more like the MLS listing in the United States. So it's got like, and of course you can filter things, but it's going to have like plots of land, it's going to have apartments, it's going to have
Hmm.
commercial buildings, stuff like that. So it's got like more properties, but it's almost harder to filter through to find kind of the gems. So Gateway is where I would go for Italy. For France, they're the two sites I typically use. One is called FrenchEntrée.com, and the other is Leggett Immobilier. Um, and Leggett, if you just type in Leggett, French property, or Leggett real estate, you'll find it. Anyway, they're more like Gateway, where they kind of like curate
Hmm.
for cute properties, low cost typically, but you can also find in there the actual, like, hey, you can buy this 16th century chateau with a moat and you know 17 rooms, and it's those are super expensive, um, but you can filter again by price, and filter by region or department in France or region in Italy, things like that.
Yeah. And what about kind of getting local property managers and really getting that local help and sort of getting away from those listing sites that are kind of marketed towards the expat market or marketed towards foreigners, and
Right.
kind of maybe like digging into like, more local listings, but then also, even after you get like a good listing or good opportunity, getting local property managers and maybe local, maybe the property manager outsources it, but like, getting like the plumbers and the electricians and stuff like that. Have you kind of got into that world? Because that's a fun one.
Not a ton yet. I know, of course, the property, the real estate companies that I just listed. When you contact them, like, because there's been several where I'll contact them and say like, hey, do you have either more pictures of this property, or can you send me the GPS coordinates so I can see what it's near. Um, a lot of times I'll follow that up with asking questions about, like, do you guys have property management companies that you recommend? Blah blah blah. I mean, I think the way, because again, there's no like nationwide MLS kind of thing, and like you said, there are companies that, because they know they're going to work with expats, they're going to be a little more expensive because they can get away with it.
Yeah.
Is I like to browse these sites, and then again, I haven't purchased a property over there yet, but if I were going to, I would search the site, find like places where, um, again, it's got the feel, maybe the vibe I think I want to go for. And then I would, again, this would be part of that like financial planning thing we put together. You would schedule a trip to go over there for a couple weeks, and you know rent Airbnb, maybe a place nearby, but then literally go to like local real estate places, because there's
Hmm.
tons of. I mean, even like when I'm doing my Google Street Map, kind of walk around these towns, I'll be
Hmm.
walking down like on Google Street Map and be like, oh, this place on the right is actually for sale too, but it's not listed anywhere. Like I can't find it online. So you can be like, oh, like when I go to this town, I'll contact some of the real estate agents and be like, hey, here's my budget. Here's kind of the size. Here's the number of bedrooms we're thinking about. Here's where we'd like to be in the town center or the village center. And I guarantee you there's tons of places that are less expensive that are not listed, you know, anywhere unless you're local. And so you'd have to do a little bit of boots on the ground work, but um, if you wanted to get kind of maximum value, that would be the way to do it. And then, while you're there, of course, you'd be like, hey, if I wanted to tear this wall out, like who's the local person I should contact about that, or you know, who could manage this property while I'm the 8 months or whatever I'm in the United States when I'm not living here. So you definitely have to do a little more due diligence and talk to people. But again, that's a little bit of the adventure.
Yeah, zoning permits in Italy, that's a fun one. um, and so do you have any parameters or things that you're looking for in these properties? Are you looking for proximity to transportation? Are you looking for close to move-in ready condition, things like that?
I I I mean, personally, I like when I'm looking for something where I think, oh, that's a place where I could potentially see myself. Um, I don't mind, like, if there's some like cosmetic stuff that could be fixed up, like maybe the wallpaper is terrible, or we want to change the tile in a bathroom, things like that. But I'm not necessarily looking for like complete renovations. That just doesn't appeal to me. Not
No, of
from a
course. That's
money standpoint,
that's
and
that's a
also just from a,
nightmare. Yeah.
yeah, from an effort standpoint. Um, on the flip side, you also know, like when you look at one and it's like, was just renovated in the past 6 months, and it's got a brand new roof on it, and you know it's been made to show all the stonework and all this stuff. It's like, well, that's turnkey, but it's also, you're going to pay for it. So I'm kind of in that middle ground where it's like, I would love for a place to be livable. I want all the bathrooms to work. I don't want I want the windows to not be broken, um, but also have the ability so that I can put my sweat maybe into it and add value to it, as opposed to just paying for the value that somebody already created. Um,
Hmm. I have this
and also
idea.
what's
Oh, go
that?
for it. Go for it. Go for it.
Well, I was just gonna say, the other thing for me personally is the cost of it. I think, because I know it's difficult to get mortgages on international properties. Like unless you have already been living in a country for a while and established residency and things like that. So the other kind of limiting factor is this a place that I could potentially buy for cash? Like, so there's like a limit, an actual limit of money where
Right.
I'm not even going to consider it because I don't want to. I don't know. I just don't wouldn't want to sink that much money into one property, especially not if it's the first one. So that has an effect also.
No, no, for sure. I think turnkey is a pretty good angle just because, um, working with contractors and stuff is definitely tough overseas. So I feel like turnkey is a good angle. And so I always had this idea where if you could basically put up a website and you could basically just buy properties online, like buy now button for stuff, let's just say under 100K, turnkey under 100K, Italy, France, Mexico, Ecuador, whatever.
Right.
And it was like ready to go, buy now button, put it on my credit card, maybe do a little wire from Chase. Like that'd be sick. That'd be sick.
Yep.
So you don't have to deal with like, a multi-month negotiation and notaries and this and that. They don't even really like do building inspections, I think, in Europe. And so I don't know. I always thought that would be cool because the difference between turnkey and quote unquote like near turnkey or something
Right.
is
It
is
it can
is
be a big
hundred is
gap.
it's a big gap. It's like hundreds of hours of like random mini disasters.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And like I said, I'm still fairly early on this journey. I have discovered a couple of people like on YouTube who, at least in Italy and only for specific regions, basically their service not only are they like the real estate agent, but they do that. Like they have their own geometra and their own, they have a process for here. You need to fill out this form to get your uh, basically like the Italian. It's almost like a social security number to be able to purchase, and so they have it like already lined up for you. Like you could do this on your own, but we're going to save you 10 steps. Also, the places that he looks at are, you know, they are turnkey. I mean, they're all like completely done, beautiful, but typically they're under 100K. Maybe 110, 120. Um, but he does a very specific region, and that's it. I think it's all in Abruzzo. Um, but yeah, no, I love that idea, and the websites I mentioned, they do like the whole countries. So I don't know that they would necessarily be you know into putting a service like that together. So that it's a good like startup idea.
Hmm. Hmm. So I thought we maybe, as we're kind of getting close to concluding the episode, just kind of once again, just sort of run through the benefits of moving abroad and the things that people could consider and kind of yeah, just like what might be just sort of the differences moving abroad versus staying in the United States. We have low cost of living. We have maybe more sunlight. We have, better healthcare. Like what's really important to you, you feel, and some of the big things that are important to you and your clients and audience.
Yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head with at least a couple of big ones. Just the overall cost of living, when we can throw real estate into that. Um, the healthcare obviously is a massive one if you live in the United States and you're not 65, where you can get Medicare. I know I'm not positive about all the South American countries, but my understanding is the healthcare is very good and very low cost. But I know like Italy and France, I think, are both maybe in the top 10 in the world for quality of healthcare. And of course, it's cheap, even if you're going to pay out of pocket. It's way cheaper than in
For
the
sure.
United States. Um, the other thing to me about this, besides all the stuff we said earlier about geography and food and all that, is just the kind of slower pace of life. It's just built into the fabric of those societies to take a little extra time when you're eating lunch and enjoy that glass of wine and sit in the piazza and people watch for a couple hours every day. And um, there's just a different, a vibe. It's more about living in the moment, enjoying life, as opposed to work, 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 work for some future, you know, point that may or may not happen the way you think it is. So I think that's a massive benefit to these countries that is less tangible, but no less important.
Yeah. Hey guys, quick interruption to tell you about Bitrefill. Bitrefill is the best way to convert your crypto into gift card balances. These are gift cards that you can spend at hotels.com, Airbnb, Nike, and many more. You may remember Joel Valenzuela, previous podcast guest. He's been living on crypto exclusively since 2015, and he's a big consumer of Bitrefill. And so I asked Joel, I said, what do you like most about Bitrefill? He said that he likes the instant delivery, the precise amount so that you don't have to juggle a lot of gift cards, and he loves the global selection. Nobody else has this much selection of gift cards, over 10,000 gift card options across hundreds of countries. Go to bitrefill.com to sign up, and you can also use the code MyLatinLife for 10% back off your first purchase. Go to bitrefill.com for more information. And so, in your experience, are you seeing people have a marked improvement in terms of their happiness and their quality of life by making the move abroad?
Like I said, I'm still in the kind of research phase. A lot of the things I've seen for videos of people who have done this or are in the process of doing this, it's certainly, it certainly seems like they're, they're happier. They're fulfilling a life goal, maybe. Um, there's always going to be issues. It's the grass is greener, maybe, but it's not, the greenest that you can dream of, because there's always going to be things like, some of the bureaucracy that you mentioned earlier, maybe family issues about being separated. If you have family in the United States and you're um, abroad, there can be some, you know, mental kind of health issues that could potentially creep up. But again, those things that's why you would want to do a test. That's why you want to go live in one of these places for 2 weeks, a month, maybe a couple months, and really try to get a feel for what it's like before you know, pull the plug in the United States or committed to something overseas. Um, but like I said, if it's a dream that you've had, if you love the idea of living overseas, being immersed in a country, living like a local, you know, learning a language, there's all these things that, you know, and I know, are you going to do it or you're not going to do it? If you want to do it, let's make a plan for it. Let's start researching. Let's, again, schedule a test run. And
Mhm.
what Jeff Bezos always calls his regret minimization framework. When you're
Yes.
85 years old and you look back, what what are the things you could do now that you say, I regret not doing that? What are the things you could have done? And I think that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the test run is huge. And I was going to bring it up earlier, but didn't want to interrupt your flow because, it's funny. I think people of all age, Americans, when they go to Europe, whether as young backpackers or later for a honeymoon or whatever it is, it always crosses their mind. They're like, should I move here? It's so much better.
Yep.
Right. And so I understand that it's very tough for people to make such a life changing decision, having not visited or having not, with like limited information, maybe whatever it is. But if you do a test run, maybe visit a couple cities in Europe or, a couple target places that you're considering for retirement, that's the way to do it. Like you don't want to burn the boats. You definitely want to check it out first and make sure that it's something that makes sense. And a test run is low commitment, low investment, right? Because it's just, whatever, less than $1,000 for a round trip ticket, a couple nights in a hotel. It's not too big of an outlay, and it'll really give you a lot of information that'll go into the larger long term decisions.
Yep, absolutely.
And have you been recommending that as well? Have you been kind of helping people set up like test runs and stuff?
I haven't done that yet, but that is definitely one of the things with the service that I'm thinking about offering, where we'll basically model out what it would look like to, again, if it's a purchase, we'll actually model that out. Whether you're selling your house in the United States and buying a place overseas, or whether you're going to keep them
Yeah.
and just buy a place and then rent one out while you're not there, all that kind of hypothetical stuff. We'll all build that into the plan, but the ultimate thing at the end of it is, all right, all that stuff looks good, like on paper, but now what we need to do is, like, in the next 6 months, you need to buy tickets, book a place, and go actually be there. Like, you gotta do that. And like I said, it could be just turn into either a terrific vacation, where at the end of it you decide, it's terrific, but maybe it's not a place I can see being for the rest of my life. Or you're gonna be like, yes, this is it. It is what I thought it was, and I know I can do it now. I'm not just gonna go home and be like, oh, I wish I could go back, or I wish there was a way I could afford to do it. You've already done that kind of math up front, and
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. As we start sending things off, I was just curious, do you have some hidden gem towns in France and Italy, like some favorite spots that you're looking at or that you've particularly enjoyed?
Um, I'll say, just from the travel we did in France, we spent a few days in Paris, saw the sights, which is great. I mean, Paris is it's amazing, but for me, getting out in the countryside is where it's at. Um, the Dordogne region, which is like southwestern France, kind of down like the same latitude as Bordeaux, but a little further to the east,
Hmm.
is one of the absolute best places. Just rolling hills, castles, vineyards, quaint medieval villages. Um, it's that I know is a fairly popular spot for expats, especially like British expats. But then the kind of the regions around that, there's still a lot of very low cost real estate, very idyllic villages and places where you can find some wonderful deals. In Italy, I know my wife and I, we love mountains, so, like, they're actually, like, in the Italian Alps. There's some
Hmm.
pretty amazing places. So you can be very close to Switzerland and France in the Italian Alps, but still be relatively low cost because you're on the other side of the mountains. Um, the Abruzzo region, which again I hadn't really looked into before,
Hmm.
which for people listening is about the same latitude as Rome, but it's on the east coast of
The
Italy, whereas
Adriatic
Rome's
side.
on the western coast. Um, so on the other side of those mountains, just, again, unbelievable villages up on these hilltops, maybe 30, 45 minutes to the Adriatic Sea. Um, you know, they actually do get seasons there, because it's the altitude, so you can get some snows during the winter, but still nice and temperate during the summers. That's a beautiful area too.
That's cool. That definitely gives me an idea of kind of the things you're looking at. I hadn't even heard of Dordogne region in France, so that's I'm looking at it. It's like the big cities are like Périgueux and
Yeah,
Bergerac.
Perigo. There's Perigo. There's Sarlat, La Canada.
C'est
Um,
là la Canada.
yeah, it's there's a great the Dordogne River, which runs through that area, is a great, like, lazy river, very old river. So they have tons of, like, canoe and kayak trips, and you literally go down on a canoe or kayak, and you'll go by, I don't know, a half a dozen castles that are, like, hanging over the river. Um, it's amazing. It's beautiful.
Yeah. No, very cool. And as you continue digging up these properties, I definitely enjoy seeing it. I'm sure all the listeners enjoy seeing it. So keep tweeting them out when you find them, and I'll retweet it. I'll engage with that because I think that stuff's very cool. So
I
really,
appreciate it.
really big fan of what you're doing, Tommy.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on again. If you go to traveltirement.com and sign up for the weekly newsletter, again, you'll get a little taste of kind of the types of properties I look at, and you'll be able to see, again, the YouTube videos. And if they're interested or interesting, that's great. If not, you can always unsubscribe. But that's probably the best place to be able to interact with me kind of directly through the email newsletter.
Awesome, Tommy. Well, thanks again for doing this. This has been another episode of the My Latin Life podcast. Again, my guest today was Tommy Sikes from traveltirement.com. Thanks everyone for listening.